Hello. Hi.
The storehouse. The morning sun, not yet hot, but already presaging the heat of the day, was blinding. It's going to be a nice day, Gleb decided with relief. Over the past few days, real tropical downpours have been pouring down in Moscow, covering the central streets with streams of furious water, which the concrete asphalt Moscow land did not want to accept into its belly. And here, in the Vologda region, the elements are completely unraveled. In mid-July, the water level was almost springtime. The roads, already terrible, flooded in the lowlands, and about washed away, turning into an impassable slush. Gleb was mentally glad that he had Niva, and not some puzoterka. Otherwise, he would have been running around, looking for a cell phone signal to call a tractor. The rainy summer was quite in keeping with Gleb's mood. Depression in the weather blended harmoniously with the darkness of the state of mind, suggesting it won't get any better, it will only get worse. In April, Gleb's mother died. He hadn't spoken to her in about 10 years, because of an argument that he couldn't quite remember the cause and duration of. But by then the distance between them seemed normal, until April. Having received a call from her neighbors, he, the only living relative, could not even come to the funeral. But over the next few months, he had plenty of time and opportunity to lose his job, drink away most of his savings, and repeatedly approach the line where you can clearly see the inferno below and the separate frying pan prepared for suicide. But he didn't dare cross the line. And now, when he had already touched the bottom of his life, he could either swim up or stay at the bottom forever. Gleb chose the ascent. He stopped the car, switched it to neutral, and raised the handbrake. With pleasure, I got out of the uncomfortable chair and patano stretched, crunching my stiff joints. The place he found was perfect for a tent. The descent to the water was not very convenient, but it did not take much to launch a single-person inflatable boat. Gleb looked at the sun reflected in the white lake and squeezed his eyes shut. Fishing, judging by the water level, did not portend a rich catch. But it was not just for the sake of fish that he came to this paradisiacal place, which was surprisingly not polluted by visiting amateur fishermen. Gleb spent the last half hour actually driving through virgin land, guided by a detailed satellite image uploaded to his smartphone. Somewhere nearby, about 3 or 4 kilometers along the coast, there was some nameless village, not marked on the map, but clearly inhabited, judging by the photo from space. Gleb opened the trunk lid and began to get out everything that made up his camping kit: gear, tent, swampers, sleeping bag, water. But the canister in which Gleb wanted to pour water in the last village he came across was empty. Holy shit, On swore softly, glaring at the plastic container as if it might fill with water. I felt like I'd forgotten something. Gleb discarded the original plan to make his way on the Niva in the opposite direction. He didn't want to be stuck in this buggy all the way to the village and back. He decided that there must be a well in that nameless village. So after throwing his things back in the car, he clicked the button on the alarm key fob. The old red Niva gave a tired grunt and winked at the dimensions. I hope some stray native doesn't show up and sort out all the details, he thought wearily, but then decided that no one would get into this jungle during his absence. A walk on foot seemed to Gleb a real pleasure. The air, which was losing, but not yet completely lost, the coolness of the night, gently stroked my hands and only occasionally pricked me with some hungry mosquito. The ground in the pine forest fell softly underfoot, as if it were made of foam rubber. The awakening forest whistled, hummed and chirped in all sorts of ways, occasionally shooting rays of light from under the branches at the unexpected guest. Gleb even forgot himself for a few minutes and stopped thinking about what he could have done in time for the funeral. 50 minutes later, the forest suddenly ended and was replaced by a field, on the opposite side of which Gleb saw small wooden houses, like odnushki for snow-white dwarfs. Shifting the empty canister to his other hand, Gleb cheerfully moved forward. The village consisted of only a few yards, no more than a dozen. The houses are old, if not ancient, and made entirely of log cabins. Gleb didn't see a single car. In all the villages, even the wildest and most abandoned, it was possible to find traces of motorization, but not here. Not even a tractor or a machine frame was in sight. Here and there in the yards, behind the fences, the heads of local residents flashed by. Surprisingly, no one paid any attention to the newcomer, or rather, everyone was trying hard to ignore him. Gleb went to the fence of one of the houses, but the old woman, who was standing in the garden, immediately disappeared into the house. Right in the middle of the patch where the courtyards were located, there were the remains of a destroyed building that looked like multiple hematomas. Judging by the facade, it was a church. The once white brick was blackened with soot. The fire, apparently, was a long time ago, but for some reason, the locals did not seek to restore the holy place. In the distance, about 30 meters from the end house, a small 2-by-2 log structure with a low lopsided door and a small window on the second visible wall was hidden in a dense thicket of grass. Brevno, there was something written on the logs, but the sun made it impossible to read what it was from this distance. "It must be well," Gleb muttered. The silence of the strange village frightened him. The chickens didn't cackle, the pigs didn't grunt, the goats didn't bleat, but there were people, so there must have been cattle. As if in response to his thoughts, a cow lowed, and Gleb shamed himself. As he got closer, he looked at the inscription in surprise. "The sacrifices of the godly ones of their god are offered to the storehouses." The paint had long since faded, so that some of the letters were almost indistinguishable. "Victims of Bogumerzia," muttered Gleb, and decided to quickly get water and move to his camp. The door opened with a creak, and Gleb found himself in a small room, where the central place, like a shrine, immersed a well, a wood-burning head covered with a lid. A gate with a chain wrapped around it, with a wooden handle, a galvanized bucket perched near the lid. Gleb was instantly thirsty. He imagined crystal clear water, delicious and cold as ice, even though he knew it would probably be yellowish, muddy and iron-tinged. Sliding the lid sideways, Gleb lowered the bucket down. He bent down and peered into the dark belly of the well. The bucket's edge flickered dimly, then disappeared under the black water. For a moment, Gleb thought that someone's pale face appeared down there, but he immediately grinned. This bucket, barely visible from under the water, played a small joke with Gleb's vision, pretending to be a drowned man. When the canister was 2/3 full, Gleb stopped. There should have been enough water, and he wasn't going to carry a heavy and uncomfortable canister filled to the brim for several kilometers. He left some of the life-giving water at the bottom of the bucket, which was really as clear as a tear. Prakinul put his head back and began to drink. The water ran in icy streams, down my cheeks, down my hair, down my neck, making me shiver. And God, how delicious it was. The same taste of childhood, when you run around the yard all day, run home, and your mother brings you a full pitcher of cold water. You drink, and you can't get drunk, and your stomach starts to hurt, but you don't care, because it's delicious, delicious, delicious. And your mother looks at you and smiles, and you drink. And Gleb lowered the bucket and looked around. Tufts of tow stuck out between rotten logs, and the small window had a whole fly graveyard. Looking at the small corpses of insects, Gleb thought, what was that? For a second, he fell into a pool of memory, literally failed. Memories completely replaced reality, becoming reality themselves. It was indescribably pleasant, but strange and, like all unknown things, creepy. He felt a burning sensation in his eyes, and when he ran his hand over his cheek, he was not surprised to find a wet tear mark on his index finger. For a moment, he believed that he was at home, that his mother was alive, and that there had been no quarrel. But the moment passed and everything remained as it was. Only the taste of sweet well water remained in my mouth. Putting aside his thoughts, Gleb hastily screwed the lid on the canister, grabbed the handle and went out into the fresh air. He turned, watching the long spring slide the door back into place. The door slammed shut with a distant crunch, and the sign caught his eye again. Victims of Bogomertia. The sun was quite hot. The journey back in the heat and with the cargo still exhausting. But Gleb didn't seem to notice it. Something nudged him in the back and seemed to be saying, "Run, run while you can." He really almost ran. He had never experienced a mystical experience before, but now he had the feeling that invisible scientists in white coats were watching him like a test mouse, waiting to see how the rodent would react to this or that oddity. Gleb was terrified, but at the same time he felt rather stupid, consciously realizing that all this was just a coincidence and thinking things through. But the unconscious took over. Later, sitting quietly in his small camp and drinking hot tea, he would be able to take a more rational view of it. But for now, he just needed to get out of here. He moved forward, looking around for another way around the burned-out church. There was a crash behind him, and Gleb whirled around. Sunlight hit my eyes, blinding me for a second. He put a hand to his forehead, like a visor, and peered. A girl was standing at the entrance to the well. She was wearing a long canvas shirt. On the collar, sleeves, and hem, a scattering of patterns. Her bare ankles peeked out shyly from under the hem. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a thick braid. There was a slight smile on his handsome plump face. Gleb thought that she might have stepped out of a picture from a textbook on the history of ancient Russia. The girl stood with her back to the door as if at a loss. She stood there for a few more seconds and walked across the grass in the opposite direction from Gleb. Where did she come from? He wondered, forgetting for the moment his desire to get out of the village as quickly as possible. There were no trees in the vicinity of the well, and there was no way for the girl to appear so quickly. Suddenly, the door of the well opened, and an old man appeared on the threshold, dressed in a shabby, sometimes torn tunic and tarpaulin boots. Just like the beauty half a minute ago, he paused at the entrance, as if considering where to go, and moved somewhere to the side. There was no one in sight. Gleb was even more surprised, but what happened next turned out to be completely beyond his comprehension. The door opened again, and this time a boy and a girl who looked to be in their late 20s emerged from behind it. The sun went down behind a cloud, and Gleb could see the strange couple more clearly. They looked like peasants. The girl, like the blonde beauty, was wearing canvas shirt with patterns, but to them were added simple ornaments on the neck and arms, and on the head a hoop. The young man was dressed in trousers as white as bloomers and a white shirt. He was completely taken aback. How did they all fit in there? There was definitely nowhere for the three of them to stand. And if we assume that the first girl came out of the same place, how did they get to Vlezlin? An old man's voice rang out behind him, starchesky голос mocking, as if mimicking Gleb's thoughts. Gleb turned around in fright, so much so that Sepilsai caught my foot on a root sticking out of the ground and fell, dropping the canister. The wet plastic flask was instantly covered in dust. My heart thumped indignantly, pounding painfully in my ribs. Father Sveta, Gleb's unexpected companion, threw up his hands. His face, small and pinched, had a timid, toothless smile, slightly hidden by a gray beard. Sweat glistened on his bald head. Don't worry about it. I was sitting there watching you. And the old man pointed to a thick bush. Gleb did not like the old man's eyes, which could not stop and kept walking, sometimes clockwise, sometimes counterclockwise. Not once did the old man focus his gaze on the other person, as if his eyes, like small children, did not obey him and continued to indulge. You, who are you? Gleb finally managed to say, slowly getting up from the ground. Me? Pahom, my groin. Don't push yourself. Gleb nodded, slowly coming to his senses. Gleb, he said. Glebushka, it appears. Good name. Pahom nodded, pronouncing each O, as if that letter was the basis of his speech, and all the others were just a background for adding shades. My grandfather sat down right on the path, in the dust. Sit down, Glebushka, Pabandlak, Maleho. Gleb squatted down next to him. He knew he had to get out of this creepy village, but his curiosity got the better of him. He had a feeling that he might learn something important. Hey, Pahom, what's this strange village you've got here? It's a hamlet, but it was once a town, Beluzero metro station. Gleb remembered studying the lake shore on the map. You mean Belozersk? But he's on the other side, from the south. No, Glebushka, Pahom giggled, twisting his eyes. This is Hinonyes Yuga, and he was once Tutaka. The plague killed him, so almost all Atsuthe Otsuls left. The door opened, and Gleb saw a little girl, dressed much more modernly than all the previous people who came out of the well. Pahom suddenly stopped talking and fixed his suddenly fixed eyes on the girl. He stared for a few seconds, squinting, then muttered under his breath, "Not her," and turned to Gleb. The eyes moved again, as if on cue. From time immemorial, when priests did not bring crosses and icons here, there were customs of their own. The dead were not buried in the ground like stolen gold, but burned. And instead of memorial lamentations, they asked 3 questions. And instead of saying a good word for themselves in the next world, they sent their relatives to this one. За родню на том свете они зазывали родню сюди, на этот. What do you mean, зазывали? And here it is. Зазывали. Wells are not just water. They are a path to the hidden Zakradny world. The local people slaughtered cows and goats and dragged their horses, stops, that the gods would allow them to meet their own people, dance, and say goodbye. Gleb looked at the inscription on the log cabin, "Victims of homage to God." The old man sniffed, and Gleb was surprised to see a single tear roll down his dirty, wrinkled face, leaving a wet furrow. The priests, as soon as they came, and even to this day, bowed, say that all this is heresy and blasphemy. Fools. The old man waved in the direction, as Gleb guessed, of the burnt-out church. A burnt church, he corrected himself, somehow sure that was what had happened. So these people are from. Well, they are. They departed. They go out on the tool and wander around, rummage for their own people, and then disappear somewhere. Maybe снова возвращаются, they're coming back from the river again. Or maybe they're still wandering around somewhere. Gleb watched in horror as the door opened a crack and a legless old man in dirty rags emerged from the well. He struggled out, looked around in confusion, and crawled into the woods. "And you, ice from the White Sea. I'm waiting for my daughter Heraka. She died an innocent soul 8 years ago. My wife disappeared earlier, so Nastasiushka was left alone with me, and the priests took her too. So who should I go to but this?" He turned toward the village, pagans. "They're better at it. You see, wait. You say you from the White Sea? But why are you sitting here? You are not a local." The old man's eyes darted and darted. "And the path home is the same for all of them, so they are all walking together. Into the light?" Something turned over in Gleb's head. The Sud were all coming and going. Fate dragged him here literally by the scruff of the neck and poked his nose. He will be able to say, though, what he did not have time to say, what he thought up in those 3 months when he drank heavily. He can apologize. Gleb opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. The door slammed again, but he didn't even look in the direction of the well. "Listen, Pahom." He finally found his voice. "Can I sit here with you? I'll wait. Why shouldn't you? Sit down, Glebushka. Together. Still not alone." Gleb sat down in the dust like a groin. The two of them watched as the door slammed shut and no Poco the restless souls who had found their way up and home but were no longer finding their home dispersed in different directions. Pahom, how long have you been sitting here? Waiting. Pahom's eyes finally stopped moving and stared at Gleb for a long time. Yes. I think we have a little more time to sit. Not for long, he finally said, looking at Gleb intently. And then his eyes started spinning again. Not for long, he chuckled. Gleb nodded and turned his head toward the well. The door slammed, and another soul stepped out into the light. Not much left, Gleb repeated to himself. Not for long. 17.072,000 and 1721.072,000 and 17